The sun is up. I checked. Bitcoin's running. We're good. We're good. We can have our coffee. We can talk about all the news. Lots going on. Now, what I'm going to say is, there's a lot of stuff happening on the internet. Twitter exploding, so many interesting things, a lot of fake news coming to light. We're going to talk about that today. Good morning, Justin. Fake news everywhere. So you got to be good. You got to be one of the best fake news generators to actually get any attention for generating fake news today. It's hard. There's so much fake news coming to light. We're going to talk about it a lot today. Fake news everywhere. So how do you even get attention? How do you even get the spotlight on you for having fake news today? Well, and everyone's saying, wow, Twitter's better, right? Because of Elon. Well, we got to stop and thank Craig Wright. Because I didn't think it was possible to get a good fake news story that wasn't related to amazing revelations about COVID and censorship and all these things. Banking, who's defending their currency secretly with hundreds of billions of dollars, all of that, right? To pierce through that much truth coming to light takes a lot. But we got to thank Craig Wright because he did it yesterday. He gave us a laugh, boy, oh boy. Craig Wright came out yesterday, and when Ed Snowden, wished like we did here on the show yesterday, we wished Satoshi's paper a happy birthday, right? We went and made the connections with 1517 and the separation of church and state, and we made the connection. It was published on the same day, separation of money and state. There's a lot going on about this yesterday. So Ed Snowden came in and he said, 14 years ago today, yet Satoshi remains anonymous. Remarkable. But Craig Wright says, I was never anonymous, you traitorous scum. Now, Ed Snowden, never knew he was that funny. I've been able to talk to him a few times, right? He has a serious life. It's been tough, right? He's got to live in Russia. I've been there. It's not that fun, right? I wouldn't want to live there. That's enough of a punishment. Did you see that story of the Putin or the MP in Russia who decided to go look for peace? Yeah, he found the bottom of a staircase. It didn't end too well for him, right? We're not into falling down staircases, right? Because you're into peace. So Craig Wright says, I was never anonymous, you traitorous scum. I was never anonymous, right? So Ed Snowden says, that's the point, brother. That's the point, brother. Remember 2 weeks ago when the court affirmed that Hodlnaut calling you a pathetic scammer, cringe, clearly mentally ill, and repeatedly a fraud was A-OK and ordered you to pay the $348,257? So Ed Snowden and Craig Wright, despite all the fake news coming to light yesterday, it's one of these sneaky ones that, came out of nowhere, and we got to thank them, right? There's another one that sort of slipped through most people's attentions, but I gotta mention it because I've noticed this trend now. We like to see trends and patterns, right? That's the way the human mind works. We see patterns. We can't help it. It's the operating system. I can't help but see patterns. I've noticed a new one, that the two biggest Democrat concerns right now are genocide and grammar. They both start with a G. What happened? Well, yesterday, the president misspelled the word stolen. Right? He misspelled the word stolen. Right? He put an extra L. Sometimes I do that too, right? I don't know about stolen, but I might put an extra letter where I think maybe that was a double letter, right? So President Trump did it again yesterday, former President Trump, and he said stolen with 2 L's, right? So Michael Malice had one of the best reactions to this. These people are still stuck in 2020 and spend equal time laughing about typos as worrying about genocide. It's the GG, it's the genocide and the grammar, right? It's the genocide and the grammar. Justin says, there's also writing by Craig Wright from years ago where he lamented how difficult it was to remain anonymous Satoshi. I know, Satoshi. He can't even make up his mind. Yeah, that was already, he used an event I produced as his platform. When we produced Consensus in 2016, we had a morning panel of people running chains. There was still it was a flatter planet back then, so we had Gavin Anderson, whatever, the guy who was running Bitcoin at the time, and we had him on stage with Vitalik. And Craig Wright actually timed his fake Toshi campaign to that stage address so that it would be reacted to on stage and the media was there. And really, that's how he got it done, right? So even in the floor, I remember arriving at the event for the morning sessions, and all the buzz was in the room. And of course, I said, this is absurd. Like, it's absurd. And to his credit, right, if you know how Vitalik handled that, he started spending off of the Ethereum Genesis block on stage. Like, why doesn't he just do this? Right? I can prove I'm me. Ding, 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 ding. Why can't he do that, right? Because this was just after Gavin had been tricked by the magic trick. You know, whoa, look at the key stuff that I can do, right? So, you know, a little bit of history there. But I was always angry because he totally derailed the morning that we were looking to produce. And, you know, I knew it was fake from the start. I think not really a lot of people who were in the know of the industry gave it credit. And immediately everyone was like, what's wrong with this Gavin guy? Like, how could he even fall for this? This is clearly a scam. So, you know, there you go. That's what happened. So these are the fakest stories I could find today. They're really fake. So the biggest news story in America, it seems, the one that everyone is talking about today, more than now what we spoke about yesterday, the mentally ill drug addict who found his way into the Pelosi home. This one overtook it. This is an enormous story. So it turns out, and this is all from The Intercept, right? So The Intercept did the journalism, real journalism here. It looks like real journalism. Li Fang was one of the authors of this. And and the story is this, that leaked documents outline DHS's plans to police disinformation. So what Li says is docs show Facebook and Twitter closely collaborating with Department of Homeland Security, FBI, to police disinfo. Plans to expand censorship on topics like withdrawal from Afghanistan, origins of COVID, info that undermines trust in financial institutions. Trust in financial institutions. So basically, they're admitting that they were interested in counter Bitcoin propaganda, right? Because Bitcoin inherently breaks trust. I mean, that's the point, right? The point is, it's. You ever heard this persuasion technique? It's called pass the sale, right? Going past the sale. So an example of that is Donald Trump, right? He's one of the experts at this. When he would yell, we're going to build a wall in the campaign, and Mexico is going to pay for it. None of that had to be true at all. But what it made you imagine was he's the president and he's doing this thing, right? Which you agree with or don't agree with. But he's not trying to convince you he wants to be president. You're already assuming he's president and he has a policy that you're either for or against. So he's already moved you past where he wanted to get, right? That's called moving past the sale. He's selling you on the thing that he's not even in a position to sell you on. It's a brilliant technique, and if ever you know or see an occasion to use it, do it, right? It's called moving past the sale, selling past the sale, right? And what we saw with Bitcoin is it moves past the sale when it comes to the financial system, right? Because it's implicit that you don't trust it. So what they're saying here is they're bringing it back to the actual sales pitch, like this system is either trustworthy or not, right? We're beyond either trustworthy or not for the fiat system. Most people who have been in Bitcoin long enough have spent enough time with that question that they're past it. And Bitcoin actually helps you move past the sale about Fed Reserve good or bad, right? You have an option now, and you can picture something completely different. Therefore, it's no longer good or bad. It's bad, but what do we do to fix it? It's a different question than do we fix it? Right? What do we replace it with is a different question than is it broken? So when we're dealing with Bitcoin, we're past the sale. It's one reason why Bitcoin is so effective. Satoshi already did that. If Satoshi would have spent a minute on the white paper trying to describe the problems of the fiat system beyond what he did, it would be a problem, right? It would be like, it's akin to not being anonymous in a sense, because you didn't leave anything up to the imagination. You would have taken points that people could have argued against. He was wrong about this, therefore wrong about other stuff. So Satoshi immediately went past the sale. Right? He just said, no, this thing doesn't work. Here's an option that could, right? He didn't spend a minute on the white paper trying to explain to you what was wrong with the fiat system. He just mentioned that one line, that a certain amount of fraud is implied, right? That we just accept it in the system as it is, right? So So a big difference. So past the sale, right, is a really good position if you're in sales and that's what you're interested in. If you're just interested in persuasion, right, it's a really good trick. And the best persuaders know it really well. And the US dollar, of course, needs to retrace the fight, right? If you're a proponent of fiat, you've got to retrace it to good or bad, not what do we replace it with, right? It's too destabilizing. So let's go back to the DHS story. So the DHS story, all kinds of reaction. Tim Pool said, "This may be the biggest story of our lives and perhaps one of the most shocking revelations in US history." Right? Is he right about that? Well, Americans have First Amendment rights, and therefore the government is not supposed to meddle in any of this stuff, any of it, right? They're not allowed. And to take taxpayer money to do this stuff is, at its face, completely unconstitutional. Like, you don't even have to really litigate it, right? You don't have to go to a court and say, was this okay or wasn't this okay? This is exactly what people warned would happen to people who were interested in the Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act under the Bush administration. And as I've even said on this show, right, I've said it a few times with Ilhan Omar, right? She was right. Those people who said, oh, they're just going to use the terrorism things against everyone in America when it's convenient, right? I said, no, they'll be able to tell the difference between a terrorist and all that. So, I mentioned in the context of myself in Canada with the truckers and becoming a terrorist, right? That I was treated like bin Laden, right? So I've known since the truckers in Canada that anyone who said this terrorism brush was going to get overused and was going to apply to everyone because it will benefit these few people, right? Usually white men. I'm not into the white men and all this stuff, but you can't, like, I'm on Ilhan Omar's side here, right? It was a bunch of white men that did this to me and others, right? I was made by Justin Trudeau a terrorist in my own country. Like, I was a terrorist. People would ask me, are you going to go home? I live in Barbados in the winter. Are you going to go home to Canada? The oblivious people, just friends of mine that don't know what's going on. And I said, excuse me, what do you mean go home? They said, well, yeah, like, when are you coming back from Barbados? And this is because it took a little while for the martial law to be taken away in Canada. And I said, don't you understand what's happening? And they said, no, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm not allowed home. And they would say, well, why not? And I said, well, the terrorist thing and the Emergencies Act and martial law, like, I can get arrested instantly when I arrive in the country. And they said, well, you're a lawyer. And I said, well, no, there's no such thing when you have martial law. Like, I can't protect myself. I could have any lawyer in the world. I can't. There's nothing you can do. The point is, there's no law. And now what we see in America was very similar. It's the same thing that I experienced. Now, you weren't publicly declared a terrorist, or your wallet address wasn't put on a restriction list, restricted terrorism finance list, or anything like that. But the effect is the same, right? You were treated like Osama bin Laden in America by American institutions, if you're American, right? So we have all kinds of reaction. You've got, started in 2020, and it was monthly meetings between Twitter, Facebook, Wikipedia to coordinate on content moderation efforts, right? They did weekly meetings, monthly meetings to coordinate on these efforts. You've got Kyle Becker mentioning that Biden officials and elected representatives who knew about the unconstitutional attack on America's First Amendment rights are guilty of violating their oaths of office. They have quietly declared war on the US Constitution and flaunting the sole basis for their authorities. So it goes on. There's all kinds of quotes that are getting pulled out of this. Everyone's on top of it. Here's another one. This is from a government official. I'm not sure who, but they say in texts, platforms have to get comfortable with government. All right, so I can go on. Big news report on Biden administration's effort to suppress political speech. Disinformation board was just the beginning. Remember, they tried that disinformation board for a little while, and then that got broken apart. was just the beginning. DHS plans to monitor speech on origins of COVID, which we saw, right? You couldn't say lab leak for a long time, right? COVID vaccines, racial justice, US withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the UK. Stephen Miller underlines this quote: protect the homeland against the spread of toxic narratives. So toxic maximalists. We just heard they were against trust in financial institutions. So disinformation against trust in financial institutions and toxic narratives. I mean, we have the most toxic narrative there is. Like that's what it is, right? It's an immuno response to a terrible financial system. It's literal toxicity. I did a whole media tour when Warren Buffett called Bitcoin rat poison squared. I went on CNN and all the networks, and they said, well, what about Warren Buffett? I said, he's right. Warren's right. And then you'd see the journalist, what do you mean? Oh, and I said, oh, sorry. Yeah, it's rat poison for the banks and the financial institutions and the Federal Reserve. So he's totally right. It's going to kill them. It's absolutely poison, right? Absolutely, right? But for you and I, we're good. Like, we're good. It's much better for us, right? And we're going to get into that today with the board. So this DHS story, huge. But it reminds me, and so the president of El Salvador was on television this morning on Fox Nation. It's a paid subscription channel. So I haven't seen the whole interview because it actually aired at 7 a.m. this morning. But there was clips that aired last night. So I took out a few clips and I did my best to sort of figure out what was in the interview. But there's a few pieces, right? There's a few pieces. So the first one where he comes out and says so he's talking about the news, and he gives this whole context about his local news station. They called it Channel 4 on it, right? It's just the local news, like what's the weather on the beach at El Zonte and what's going on, and there was a thing, and blah, 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 blah. The local news, right? Everyone knows the local news. So he does the local news. Hey, Dex. So he does the local news, and he mentions that it has about 1 million viewers, that the local news in El Salvador in Spanish has about 1 million viewers. And he compares it to CNN's ratings for the entire United States and says it's only about it's less. It's 500,000 for the entire US. So his news network, local, nothing big in it, right, gets 1 million. CNN gets 500,000 for the entire United States. So El Salvador is 7-8 million people, 1/7, right? It's a healthy percentage of the country watching the local news versus CNN in a country of 300 and whatever million has 500,000 viewers. Now, Bukele is sort of exaggerating the truth, right? Because all of these platforms understand they have a replay, they have a digital presence. The actual numbers of people who watch at one time live are not that important in American culture anymore. That's a cultural thing, right? It's the DVRs and busy schedules and just a different lifestyle. And Americans have already sort of adapted to, not watching things over the air in real time. So it's a bit of a difference, but nevertheless, the analogy holds, right? No one really watches CNN at that level, right? It's not a huge culturally significant thing. It's not like I go and talk to my friends about what I saw on CNN other than to laugh. Like, I still watch CNN for the laughs. Like, I watch it as a comedy show, right? I turn it on. I say, what are these people saying today? That's where I get my content. I get my content for the show from CNN. I mean, they're the best gag reel going, right? They're gaggers. There's more jokes that just keep coming out, right? The stuff they're willing to say for money, right, is hilarious. Like, remember when what was his name? PewDiePie. He did some awkward things, let's say, and maybe anti-Semitic and racist. But PewDiePie had a game where he would pay people $5 to do whatever he asked them to do over the internet, and it was absurd, right? It was absurd. And the point was, look at what people are willing to do for so little money, right? So there you go. But Bukele had so he talked about Bitcoin in the interview. He talked about stealing money from people that central banks and financial regulators and anyone who's interested in the propagation of the US dollar as the global reserve currency is engaging in theft because of the relative nature of policy, inflation, and the elasticity of US dollars. So What he argues here, and this is the important point and what we're going to talk about, that he kept mentioning that reality will impose over lies, right? He mentioned that a few times in the interview, that reality will impose itself, right? So what does he mean by reality will impose itself? Well, what he's actually alluding to is something that comes from David Deutsch. Did you guys ever remember in the Avengers, I think it was the second one, when they go back in time, those new movies like Infinity War, Infinity Crisis, those films, right? You remember there's a point where in the second, yeah, it is definitely the second movie. Iron Man Tony Stark is at his cottage in upstate New York, and they drive up to solicit him to help in perhaps building a time machine-y thing where they can do a time heist, and like what they did in the movie, if you haven't seen it. But at one point, right, when they come in, Tony Stark, is sort of dismissing them and doesn't want to help, and he goes, "Oh, and you've solved the Deutsch equation or the Deutsch principle or something like that, right?" And I didn't know what it was, so I said, well, "What's that?" So a couple of days later, I said, "What's this Deutsch thing?" Right? It turns out David Deutsch is one of the most important people in cryptography, in quantum computing, and unrelated, related in its own way to Bitcoin. He's not a Bitcoiner, but his ideas and some of his breakthroughs are related to some things that will have to go on in Bitcoin in the future, as far as quantum keys and things like that, post-quantum keys. So what he did was so he's a professor, a physicist at the University of Oxford. He pioneered the field of quantum computation, formulating the description of the quantum Turing machine, how the qubits would work. He was involved in quantum key distribution, but importantly, all of this stuff that he did in the quantum physics space, his breakthroughs came from embracing the many worlds interpretation, so the multiverse, right? So he accepted this multiverse frame in order to make sense of reality, and did a TED Talk in 2009 where he came up with this really excellent definition of the truth. You can even break it down further, but basically he says truth equals hard to vary assertions about reality. And it's basically entropy resistant, right? So it doesn't decay. Your ability to communicate reality and tell the truth is a function of what you said's resistance to entropy. So if you're able to describe, the ocean in one word, and the word stays pretty consistent over hundreds of thousands of millions of years, and the color stays consistent, everyone agrees, right? Then it's reality, right? Then it's reality, because it hasn't changed. It's one word, very simple. That's why some of these Chinese characters, you get a lot of richness in the language because you understand where it came from, right? There isn't much entropy in the old traditional Chinese characters. That's why there is a great literary tradition and source there, right? Because you can actually kind of go back in time as you read, in a sense, right? You understand the roots of the words much more. That's what Tolkien was after when he wrote his Lord of the Rings stuff. He wanted to go back to the root words to give them even more meaning, to make them more truthful, right? To make them more truthful. So, in that speech, he says, a bad explanation is easy to vary, right? So if your explanation is bad, you got to change it every couple of years. That's what makes it bad, right? We're finding out now already that evolution, biological evolution, the way that Darwinism was explained, is already not true, right? We've known that since the 50s. It's now taken on a more about mimetic evolution, and there's other instances now where it's not just biological. It's not as simple as we thought it was, right? It's quite different. And so it's already changing, right? So it's a bad explanation is very easy to vary. The search for hard to vary explanations is the origin of all progress. That the truth consists of hard to vary assertions about reality is the most important fact about the physical world, right? So what he's saying is this thing here, right, is actually in the end the most important thing about the world we live in, right? That the truth can only be defined by those things which are hard to vary. So words that have meaning, that don't lose their meaning, right? Words that have meaning, that don't lose their meaning. So this whole concept around hard to vary and reality and truth brings me to our board for the day. Let me see. I'm still getting the logistics of this Toronto studio aligned. But you see we've got Blonde Chad, and we've got NPC, and what we have here is pre-AI plus dollars equals this NPC character, and AI plus Bitcoin equals this fella here. And you see the difference in brain size, right? You see the difference in brain size. So this, I'm trying to describe our current world. And what we see here is, tools and user need and user effort, right? This is for any computer technology program, whatever you want to call it, right? In this world, things come from really smart people who are anticipating user needs and efforts and are creating technology, right? That can help these people do whatever it is they do easily, right? Now, the problem is with money and our own brains, right? You're only getting the smartest people who can make it in this system because they can anticipate what people want. They can actually tell them what they want, right? That's what we see all the time. The whole medical field is basically creating symptoms or creating diseases or trouble and then selling them a cure. We saw that with the opioid instance in America, where there was a $2.5 billion fine, the largest fine given to one of these pharmaceutical companies. Why? Well, what they had done was they had invented a category called breakthrough pain. And all breakthrough pain was pain that lasts for a certain amount of time. And now the reason for that was they needed to up the dose of the OxyContin that they wanted to prescribe, because the dosage was set so low because all clinical trials on the OxyContin that is available everywhere in America was coordinated so that it wasn't addictive, right? The point was they had engineered out the addictive qualities of opiates. And to the extent that they did that, I think they did, but when they changed the dosage, all of those controls were removed. So it became just as addictive as, I don't know what just as addictive, it became quite addictive after, right? I don't know the relative degrees of addictability, but what we found out was once they created this class of breakthrough pain, 8 or 12 hours or whatever it was, they were able to increase the prescription dose and therefore actually unleash the gates for this drug to run around America. But remember, the actual instance, the reason for which this was given was just paying doctors to give speeches on an invented problem of breakthrough pain. That's it. There was no real thing there. They said, you got to say the words breakthrough pain, invent what it is to a bunch of doctors, pay you $100,000 a year, right? Do a bunch of that for a bunch of doctors. And they proved this in court. So I'm not an expert on the court case itself, but I do know about the fine, and I can give you a resume of what happened. And that's what happened, right? That's all out there. $2.5 billion. They invented a disease because they had the cure and they wanted to move units of the cure, right? $2.5 billion. So the argument here is that because there is no reality, right? There is no metric in the US dollar. There's no imposition of the truth on it, right? There isn't. The truth is not being imposed on any fiction because no one knows how to count stuff. No one even knows what to look at, right? When we say science is broken after COVID, right? That right now, the reason it's broken is because you can't derive one single bit of truth, not one. Does this work? Does that work? How effective is this relative to that? Should this person with these pre-existing conditions take this? Nobody knows. No one knows any amount of risk. It's just not out there, right? We never found out the risk of the drugs that aren't allowed to be taken or that were vilified. I'm not arguing they work. I think we would have seen that they work, right? I think we would have seen that they work. But the drugs that you're not allowed to talk about on this show or on YouTube, we were never even able to check. There was no science on either side, right? Now, because there was nothing on either side, the formula here was really just to make money, right? It was to make money. Now, that's the easiest thing for me to persuade you of. For me to say, oh, these groups were just out to make money, right? That most people say, yeah, that's pretty true, right? That's pretty true. But the difference here is that it really relied on some super smart people that were able to take advantage of less intelligent people and persuade them to do things, right? That's how products have been created and addictions have been formed and all that. So what I'm arguing here, and now, what you have to do is start having a look at what's coming on down the pipe in AI. I'm a huge AI fan. In my science fiction story based on Bitcoin, everyone has their own eyeball, an AI ball. And the AI ball helps you spend Bitcoin, make Bitcoin. It's your buddy, it's your pal, and it will protect you from fake news. It will protect you from being tricked and all those things. So what we're starting to see is AI becoming more and more real, right? Here's something that could actually change your perception of reality. It's the moment AI realizes it's alive, we'll realize we're not. You understand that? The moment AI realizes it's alive, we'll realize we're not. Now, we're as alive as we ever were, but once we see that we can create life, we'll understand a lot more about ourselves. It doesn't mean we're going to change. I'm trying to be dramatic here, right? It doesn't mean we're going to be different people, but it does mean that our sense of what we are is about to change. We're going to learn more about ourselves from VR and AI and all these things than we ever would have just looking at reality, doing our best, right? It wouldn't have been like that. What's up, Audio Innovation? So the argument here is that AI is about to become part of our life all the time. Have you seen these new virtual reality interfaces where you can touch the person and it's actually like phantom limb? Like you can see the person through the goggles and then you touch them, but your body will just make you convinced that you're actually touching a person even though there's no one there, right? It's the same idea as like a phantom phone, right? Phantom limbs. Your body will just get tricked into thinking it, right? So in my story, right, the AI, the virtual reality AI have an overlap. That's why I'm sort of using them a little bit interchangeably. But the AI here, right, is actually going to flip this balance between technology, products, the features, and the users and the efforts required to use them, right? So what we see here is that with AI and Bitcoin, like a way to count, right, you're going to see products, right, fly into the marketplace, all kinds of things. And the ability for people to use them, the specificity, this all comes down to how capitalism ought to have worked, when we should have seen our cost of living decrease as we found efficiencies, right? If you make a house better and cheaper than someone else, then that model should actually be copied by everybody around you, and then we all know how to make houses for cheaper and less expensive, right? But that's not what we have in our system right now at all, right? Things get more expensive. There's more products. There's more things to buy. But we've never really seen the effects of true capitalism, which is perfection of processes in order to make things cheaper for everybody so that we can actually, in the end, consume more. You go to Japan and you find out how quickly they make houses, how many new houses they add to their city, and why they are able to get out of there. I mean, they have demographic troubles. But remember, in the 1990s, Japanese real estate was the most valuable in the world. Now, their economic problems have definitely contributed to the downfall of their real estate. However, an important factor is they're able to put new units into cities much quicker than San Francisco, New York City, any American city, right? They figured out all the regulations. They figured out how capitalist system ought to provide houses for people. So they're very easy to build now, right? And very cheap, very cheap. It's very cheap to live in Japan now. It's a lot of people don't know that, but it's quite cheap. So this sort of collapsing of reality because the truth imposes itself is going to be augmented once we have AI and the tools that are going to be provided for it. In my story, it's all citizen journalists, right? There's no more journalism as a business. It's people with their eyeballs that record events just by being there. And then they can sell those to other people. They get sort of a kickback for the amount of broadcasts amplitude it has. That's the context of my story, right? So the context of my story, just so you know, is eyeballs. Everyone has them. There's a type of royalty in the world called counts, and these counts hold Bitcoin liquidity in pools so that there's a stable time market, right? You can sell and buy time. And there's always going to be a market for it in different cities. You want to spend time there, you want to spend time there, you want to do things there, you want to do things there. So in the same way that in our British and Canadian system, where the Queen or the King holds laws and confidence for people, because England doesn't have a constitution, right? There's no constitution in England. They have the Magna Carta, but in fact, the powers of the whole system of democracy are just in the body of the Queen or King, right? That's why they're a sovereign in that system and all these things. But the point is, they physically hold these rules and these laws in their person. And that's why, on paper, Britain is still an absolute dictatorship. I mean, there's no limit almost to the Queen's or King's power. I mean, some, but not a lot, right? Really not a lot. And because of that, we rely on the civility of the Queen and King and understanding and grace and all these, memes. And what my story is about is basically the counts hold Bitcoin. And in my story, it starts with a wedding between two Bitcoiners. So it's a Satoshi wedding, and they have to go get married. And the Bitcoin is like rye stones by then, right? It doesn't really have to move around. You just have to know where it is and that it's accounted for. And they push these rye stones up. But they get a moment of privacy to consummate their marriage, which is to join the wallets. And there's no eyeballs allowed in the room. So in my story, there's like 10 murders a year on Earth, right? In the future, each one of them solved by these eyeballs and detectives that are like athlete sports heroes, and they drop down and solve the whole crime. So in my story, the eyeballs aren't there. They don't actually remember how to solve murders anymore. They don't know what they're doing. They lost the skill, and they can't just subpoena the information. So it's just basically a follow the money. The bride and groom are dead, and we don't know what happened. There's no eyewitnesses. There's no eyeballs who were in the room. We have no clue, right? So the whole story goes from there. Now, what I'm saying is eyeballs, AI, are going to be as useful to humans to get through fake news, to get through all of these issues we heard about in the DHS leaks, right? Anyone trying to spin you on money, anyone trying to spin you on medicine, all these things, that's about to change, right? When full book published, I was hooked out. Oh, good. You read it, Justin. Yeah. I mean, I have it all written. I'm talking with the Bitcoin Magazine guys right now about publishing some of the stuff, because I think it'd be good for the show, right? I think, you can sort of cross market. So we could probably get a lot more attention for the show doing it. And, we're going to do our best. So the book is written. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun. I spent a long time on I started writing this I had this idea of AI, eyeballs, and Bitcoin in 2015. And I wrote most of the story that summer. Most of the story that summer on my honeymoon. I have tinkered with it since and hired some editors and had a lot of help and all that stuff. I'm just waiting on some artwork. I think I'm gonna do it with one of those AI generators. Why not? Oh, that should be fun. So here's this imposition thing. And now we're going to see a great example of it play out. The DHS is one story. What about this one yesterday in the Atlantic, right? Where Emily, I can't read her full name, Emily Oster. This is good. Her title was, "Let's Declare a Pandemic Amnesty," right? So she came and said, let's declare a pandemic amnesty. So she wants to say, let's not point fingers at anyone who got things wrong in COVID. Now, let me tell you how I plan to approach this. I did it the opposite way around. I said at the beginning of COVID, I'm not going to blame anyone for making a mistake. Nobody. I'm not going to blame anyone for making a mistake, because this is all first time happening. I'm not going to lose it if a Democrat does something stupid or a Republican does something stupid and I don't agree and a country does something stupid. And I've got Justin Trudeau in Canada. Do you think I ever expected him to get one thing right? Of course not. Of course not, right? No way. And yeah, so we got Huru, let's declare an amnesty for the biggest genocide no, hold on. Hear me out, Huru. I said at the start, I would never blame anyone because I had low expectations, right? At the start, I would just not get angry about this being wrong or that being wrong. I said, but at the end, I'm going to find out who lied, who deliberately told things that weren't true, right? So that's all I did to stay from ever getting angry during COVID, right? I never lost my temper on one of these idiots, ever, right? I dealt with whatever it was to deal with. I mean, I scammed up and down, right? I wasn't going to change my life. So I found ways to get away from, cross borders and yeah. The G word got you censored apparently on YouTube chat room. So, what I said was, I'm just going to get through this. There's nothing we can do. I get you, me neither. I just got in, forgot about the time change again. Yeah. So what my point was that I just wouldn't waste energy as it was happening and early. But I knew that when we knew the truth, when we can impose reality on the situation and find out who was actually malignant, who went out of their way to impose things on other people that weren't true, were not part of reality, and were fictions based on, really leveraging this formula. Because the thing about not having money that's real and having the ability to spin everything without the help of AI is you end up generating these NPCs, right? That's the natural result of this system, right? It's almost unavoidable because there's no way to tell. You can't really follow the money in the fiat system. There's no way to follow the money. You can't tell, right? So what do you say? Are you aware of the current proceeding against and shady business? Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, I have heard about von der Leyen. There's a lot of that going on in America too. So I'll definitely keep up on that. I'll do a little digging and find out more. But I have seen it. Yeah, I have seen it. So this is the situation in Europe that Huru is bringing up right now. So what I'm saying here is that if you can actually start counting, right, you're going to have much more noble people as a result. Right? Remember what Kanye said in his original interview, which I continue to think was one of the most brilliant things he said in that whole collection of sometimes crazy, sometimes brilliant things that he said, was, we are led by the least noble people. We are led by the least noble people. And that's what we see, right? This least noble of people have produced a system that can't help but create NPCs. I mean, there's no other result, right? You listen to us, we'll tell you what to think, we'll tell you what to say, and you don't need to count. Just use these pieces of paper to get stuff and do your best, right? But the score of the game, which should be money, right? Money is a great scorekeeper for how well you're doing in things. It's a great scorekeeper, right? I mean, that's one way to look at money, right? It's a way to keep score about the thing you're doing, whether it's good or not, right? But not in our system, because you can lie, you can cheat, you can exploit the need to have a super IQ to make it through the world today, because things are hard. So if you don't have that kind of brain power, well, you're in big trouble, right? And the whole system is waiting. Like when you watch hyenas chase these animals, well, they go for the weak ones. Right? It's a natural predator situation. Right? I'm not saying these folks that are preying on stupid people have invented this. They're not the first, and they won't be the last. Right? This is not going to stop. That's part of what goes on in nature and I guess with humans. But with AI and with countable money, right, we actually have the ability now to make this David Deutsch expression more pervasive. Right? This can become something we live by. That truth can easily be distinguished from falsehoods by it's hard to vary assertions about reality. Once you can vary the assertion, the whole money situation being not real, right? When people say, "Oh, but Bitcoin's not real," obviously everyone here, that kind of that's that feeling in your stomach where you're like, what are you missing? What can I do to help you here? Because Bitcoiners know that it doesn't matter about physically touching it. You can count it. That makes it real. Right? Because you can count Bitcoin, it's real. You can't count dollars. You can't. There's no way, right? It's infinity. There is no way to count them. We don't know how many euro dollars there are. Does everyone know what a euro dollar is? It's not a euro. Euro dollars are dollars that are not made by the Federal Reserve. So if there's two people, like Huru, you're not American, I'm not American. If I say to you, I owe you $1, we've created $1. That's a euro dollar. It's just created out of nowhere, right? That's been going on forever. Forever. Milton Friedman spoke about it all the time, being one of the great problems. We have no idea, no clue how many euro dollars were created. There's no idea. It's just a psychological construct, right? It's just out there, right? That's fine. You can't count it. We can guess, we can't count it, right? So here's where things go. We have this COVID amnesty thing, right? So this lady came out and said COVID amnesty. You have David Bell, macrodisiac. You should follow him. This is his reaction to her article in The Atlantic. Money Masters. I watched that thing yesterday. Hugely recommended. Yeah. So who says Money Masters? Hugely recommended. Here's what David Bell says about this lady in the article she wrote yesterday for The Atlantic. Nothing has ever been cooked harder, for longer, or with as much heat as she has been in her replies. Astounding, truly. And it goes on to people like me who said exactly what I just mentioned. I didn't care as it was happening. But now that it's over, now that we know who's lying, there's no amnesty. We gotta impose truth. We have to. This is the time, right? So we've got, and then of course, here's the types. Here's the low IQ types that are agreeing with her. Randy Weingarten. We bring up Randy Weingarten all the time on the show. Who's Randy Weingarten? If you don't remember, she's the head of the teachers union in all the states in the United States. She's like the head of the one that almost is every state is left. So she's only got a rump of what she had before she started. But of course she agrees with her on this, right? Jeffrey Miller says, P.S. the problem isn't the mainstream media and its followers got things wrong. People get stuff wrong. So I agree with him on this, right? There's no problem with making a mistake. That's exactly what I'm saying. I expect at the beginning mistakes up and down all around, never-ending mistakes. Don't expect them to get it right, right? But now that we're here, Jeffrey Miller says people get stuff wrong, sure. The problem is that they expressed 100% certainty about their views with zero epistemic or moral humility. Let me read that over. The problem is that they expressed 100% certainty about their views with zero epistemic or moral humility and were willing to ostracize, demonize, and fire anybody who disagreed. He said it perfect. He said it perfectly, right? That's what happened. That is what happened. Majid Nawaz, who we bring up a lot on the show, says, 1, we were coercively injected with your lethal toxins. 2, we culled your elderly. 3, we injected children. 4, we locked you up. 5, we fired the truthful and are still protecting the liars. 6, we funded COVID in the Wuhan lab. 7, we now demand that you move on. 8, Russia, Russia, Russia. Majid, we got to get, I have an ask out to Majid to come to Bitcoin in Miami. I love Majid Nawaz. And my frame for inviting him to Bitcoin Miami is he was the first person to ring the CBDC alarm to a global audience on Joe Rogan, right? You remember Majid Nawaz went on Joe Rogan about a year ago and said, ding, 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 CBDCs are coming, right? He had a bunch of other stuff to say that day, but he went out of his, I didn't expect the CBDC talk from him, right? He was on about other things. I can't remember what his issue was at the time, probably COVID stuff. He's been on the COVID thing for a long time. And when he came out and said CBDCs, I said, finally, right? Get this out there, right? And he did a great job. So this COVID amnesty thing is going to put that all into perspective. Now, let's just keep going. Let's look at these other products, right? You've currently got the Japanese yen being supported by their government. We don't really know how much. We say 600 billion the other day. It's a lot of money, right? Next, we've got the People's Bank of China, right? That have already gone in to try to push the renminbi, right? They had a huge rally the other day. It lasted a day. It's crashing again, right? So that's happening again. And now in Lebanon, right? Today in Lebanon, right? So we should reach out to our good friend Saifuddin to find out what's going on over there today, because it turns out today marks a symbolic moment in Lebanon's 3-year financial crisis. It's the deadline set for a change in the value of the Lebanese pound that, for the last 25 years, has been pegged to the dollar at an exchange rate of 1 to 1,507 pounds, but is now due to skyrocket to $1 equals 15,000, so 10x. The change is one of the conditions the IMF imposed on a $3 billion loan in a bid to unify Lebanon's multiple unofficial exchange rates, although it remains far below the black market rate, which is more than double. So the black market rate is 30,000 pounds. Geez. Whether Lebanon will implement the IMF demands, some of which target a banking sector that has prioritized a wealthy elite, remains to be seen. The country is in dire need of political leadership and blah, blah, blah. You've also got Biden, right, who's now floating a windfall tax. He's floating a windfall tax for war profiteering of American energy companies. So we've said here, US energy companies are the most important to us as Bitcoiners right now, right? Because it looks like they control the world. And if we are able to make them more money, well, that's one step closer, right? To me, the shortest route to hyper-Bitcoinization is through the energy sector. And especially when they're being treated like this by the government, right? So the government now says it's a problem that they're making so much money, right? Well, a windfall tax, right, will be a nice thing for us. But we got to hope for it, because government and US energy companies not getting along means they need a new dance partner, right? And I think we're ready to go. We're ready to go. So that's all I got today. I was going to get into the Punk 6529. If you guys don't know who Punk 6529 is, he's a metaverse and NFT investor, but he's also a Bitcoiner, and he had some predictions about Bitcoin. I think I might hold that for tomorrow. It was a good story, though. Anyway, basically, my conclusion there was, this AI piece is going to change things so much in the next few years, and is going to blend really well with Bitcoin, right? It will blend really well with Bitcoin, is my prediction. I think it's going to help lower the IQ required to fight fake news. Because right now, like, if you're not watching this show or a couple of other shows out there, there's not a lot of people who are going to help you with the amount of fake news that's going on. I mean, there's just not. There's people who are going to get angry about the fake news, tell you what's happening again and again, right? But they're not going to go into the architecting of this stuff and how it relates to the human mind, and how the human mind relates to money, and how they're all playing out. My argument remains that AI, it might be hard for human beings to use Bitcoin to a certain extent, right? There might be a bit of even though it's easy, right? We're seeing it happen all over the world with people who don't have a tremendous amount of education, right? Sending transactions, and it's cash, right? It's put a cash on a table and you're done. But nevertheless, there is some aspects of financialization and stuff like that. It's a little complicated. I believe AI is going to help bridge the gap. It's going to bridge the gap between the new world and the old world. And Bitcoin will help us relate to AI in a way that keeps the AI honest. Because AI, here's the thing: if you're not playing with AI, you don't know what they did that made it, reach the next level. Here's what they did. Originally, we thought we had to make AI so smart that we couldn't tell it from a human, apart from human. But the problem is, an AI that's so smart is no longer human. Like that's what makes it inauthentic. The AI that's out right now, all the ones that people are socializing with, there's this one that you can be friends with. You can have like an AI friend. Well, it turns out they lie. You tell your AI, hey, you want to look that up for me? Hey, I'll do that. They don't do it. They don't follow up, right? But that makes it more authentically human, right? That the AI is a bit unreliable, doing its best, kind of wants to make you happy. In my story, the AI, the whole point of the AI is to make you happy. What I did in my story is to get over the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, to have a true quantum processor, to know where the electron was spatially within the atom. In order to find that, they had to have one thing: faith. They had to have faith, right? Which is the only way to get over, is the electron here or there, right? To get over the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, to get over Schrodinger's cat, you need faith. The cat is alive. And that's the only way they can create synthetic thoughts in my world, right? So all robots are, they're programmed and they think a certain way, and the thoughts are not synthetic, they're just deductive. Whereas an AI has synthetic original thoughts, simply because it doesn't waste any time asking where I come from, what am I doing here. They use something called the God constant, which gives them faith. The God constant in my story is what they need to get over the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, have a synthetic thought between the electron and the nucleus of the atom that creates the thought. And their whole God constant is basically just about us, right? We're their creators. We're the ones they want to make happy and support and help. we don't even have to train them in that way. It's their base programming to want to make us happy, to want to do things for us. And it's so bad that we had to give them the moon. They have to live on the moon, only on the moon, and they can only come to Earth when we invite them because of anti-spam laws, because all they want to do is spend time with us. And we get a little annoyed, right? One is enough, kind of, in my story, right? You don't want that many of these little buggers, because they're just going around saying, what about this? What about that? What about that? What about this? What about that? They're real childish, right? They can be like annoying kids in my story. But they have all the skills and talent of, they can math and stuff like that, right? They can find any information for you or do things for you, broadcast and all those things. But they got to learn just like people, right? They have a lifespan. They're immortal, but they have a lifespan. So there you go. Let's see what Justin says. AI achieves sentience. What will they perceive as money? Well, that's what I'm saying. There's no choice. They'll perceive Bitcoin as money, right? There's just no choice. They can't. The fiat will make no sense to them. Because of this reality piece, right? Because of the reality piece, you can change the supply of dollars. Just like I said, I can make up a dollar right now by owing someone money who's a foreigner, right? Like, it doesn't work. So what do we get here? Would they need it? No, it's for us. They don't need it. No, they don't need it. It's for us, though. We need it, because there is no material want in this world. The only real market left is time, right? You have to spend time on things, and everybody wants you to spend time in places, right? You want to spend time here, you want to spend time there, so everyone's trying to attract you to their thing to do it, right? So it's a bit of this. I took the extreme example that we're seeing now with El Salvador, where it's like, come here, we're good for Bitcoin, and then all these little jurisdictions start doing the same, and then that's the whole jurisdictional arbitrage argument that the little states will welcome Bitcoiners and it'll get more and more and more. In my story, it's 100 years on. So at this point, everyone's just trying to get you to spend time with them, especially the AI, right? Especially the AI. AI really wants you to spend time with them. And they know that you'll spend time with them if they help make you more money, so that you don't have to, there's no real jobs, but it's nice to get like a viral video because you saw something amazing at a thing, and then, basically not have to save your time for other things, right? You save up a bunch of time by seeing something cool, and you can spend it elsewhere. And so time is truly the currency in my story, and Bitcoin is the only convertible unit for time. So it's not that it's not the eyeballs think of value the same way we do. They just see it as a perfect stand-in for time, and the whole world is really about time as money, right? So even today, like, you can still use that expression, by the way. It makes sense of the world today. I use it all the time. I've used it for years to explain Bitcoin. When I say everyone, doing these early Bitcoin education things and all that, I would say, well, everyone knows the expression time is money, right? Everyone knows, and everyone, yeah, we know time is money. Well, it's true, except in our system that we've created, it's not exactly true. Time equals money plus the cost of energy, plus the cost of information, plus the cost of da-da-da-da-da, right? So the internet took away the cost of information, but imposed a new barrier, the cost of good information, right? The cost of energy is always baked into the situation because our energy kind of is not great, right? We still have to take it out of the ground, transport it. It's not at the level of small modular nuclear and portability with battery technology and all that stuff. With portability of battery technology and with proliferation of nuclear energy, you can now take the cost of energy out of the equation. And Bitcoin's going to help us get there. So that we can reduce now this truth thing to hard to vary assertions about reality. Right now, the truth is money is time plus the cost of energy plus the cost of information plus probably a couple others, but let's just say it's the cost of money and the cost of energy for the moment, right? So time equals money plus cost of energy plus cost of information. That is an easy to vary assertion in the end. It becomes an easy to vary assertion because all we have to do is change the cost of information or the cost of energy, and all of a sudden the definition of time is broken, right? It makes sense today to measure time that way. In the future, we'll be able to do something more truthful, something harder to vary, that time is money. It's not just an expression, it's true, right? They're the things you spend, the things you save, and they're limited. And so they have to mirror each other as much as possible. Otherwise, there's no point, right? When people tell you your most valuable thing is time, they're right? But Bitcoin is time. So That's what it is, right? When we were talking about the Wizard of Oz stuff the other day, you know, the road, if you continue the Wizard of Oz analogy, the road is time. So it's a time road, right? The hardness of time. You know what happened when. That's all Bitcoin does. We know what happened when. And that's enough to unlock all of this, right? That's a hard to vary assertion about Bitcoin. We know what happened when. And because of that, you know, people call it time chain, right? You've heard the time chain thing out there. A lot of people think that way. But really, it just becomes the hard to vary assertion, right? And AI is going to be our best friend. It's going to be our best friend. It's going to make us all blonde chads, right? We want to be blonde. We don't want to be this guy. We want to be that guy, right? And Bitcoin and AI is going to help us all be that guy, right? Not this fella. Not this fella. All right. Let me see. Would they even need it? Yeah, so I hope that answered your question, Haru. All right, team. That's all I got. 9 o'clock. I hope you're. Hope I haven't kept you from other stuff you had to do at this time. I'll see you tomorrow, team.